The rain fell like shards of glass, slicing through the darkness of the forest. Every tree shivered under the storm's fury, and the wind howled with a voice that seemed almost alive. Leora pressed herself against the bark of an ancient oak, its roots twisting like frozen fingers into the earth. Her cloak, soaked and heavy, clung to her small frame, but she did not stop. She could not. The pack had cast her out just hours ago, calling her weak, an omega unworthy of respect. Even now, the sting of rejection burned in her chest. They had looked at her with scorn, their fangs bared in silent accusation, as if her existence alone had been a crime. She had left without a word, ignoring the calls of her kin, ignoring the warnings whispered on the wind. She had only one thought in her mind: survive. And then she heard it, a howl, silver and haunting, rolled across the stormy night. It pierced the rain and thunder, carrying a strange power that made her heart tremble. It was not the desperate cry of a lone wolf. It was commanding, majestic, and full of authority. Leora froze, her soaked cloak dripping into the mud. The howl tugged at something deep within her, something ancient and instinctual. Without thinking, she followed it. The forest grew denser, the storm wilder, but the sound guided her. Every step she took was slippery, uncertain, yet irresistible. The howl was like a promise whispered on the wind: protection, challenge, and destiny all wrapped into one. Leora's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. Her body ached, her muscles screamed, but she could not stop. Something told her that whoever or whatever was calling had the answers she sought. Branches clawed at her face, leaves slapped her cheeks, and roots threatened to trip her. But she pushed forward, driven by a force she did not understand. In the heart of the forest, where the darkness seemed thick enough to swallow her whole, the howl came again, closer this time. A silver light shimmered through the rain. Leora squinted, unsure if her eyes were deceiving her, and then she saw it, a massive wolf. Its fur glistening like melted moonlight, stood in a clearing. Its eyes shone with an unnatural intelligence, reflecting the storm like twin silver flames. It did not growl, it did not move toward her, yet Leora felt the weight of its presence pressing against her chest. She stumbled back instinctively, but the wolf only tilted its head, as if inviting her closer. You're not like the others," she whispered to herself, shivering from cold and awe alike. The wolf's gaze pierced her, and she felt as though it could see every scar, every fear, every secret hope she had buried inside. Memories of the pack's rejection flashed through her mind, mocking laughter, sharp words, the cruel dismissal of her strength. Yet in the wolf's eyes, she saw no judgment, only recognition. Her legs moved almost of their own accord. She stepped into the clearing, the rain soaking her hair, dripping down her face. The wolf did not move, only watched. The storm roared around them, but in that moment, the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them. Then the wolf shifted, its body elongated, twisting and growing, and before Leora's wide eyes, it transformed into a man. Tall, powerful, and otherworldly, with silver hair that cascaded like liquid light and eyes that mirrored the storm itself. Leora stumbled backward, heart pounding in a mix of fear and fascination. Who are you?" she managed to ask, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I am Kellen," he said, his voice deep and resonant, carrying the weight of mountains and centuries. "You have followed me here. I heard your howl," she stammered, though even as she spoke, her instincts screamed that she was in the presence of something far greater than herself. "I didn't. I couldn't help it." Kellen studied her quietly, his gaze sharp yet not cruel. There was something almost painful in it, a loneliness hidden beneath layers of power. "Few hear the silver wolf and survive," he said. "Fewer still follow it willingly." Leora's chest tightened. She did not understand why, but his words stung with truth. She had followed, despite the storm, despite fear, despite the memory of rejection. She had risked herself because something about him called to the part of her that had always been told she was unworthy. Why are you here?" she asked again, her voice trembling. Kellen took a step closer, each movement deliberate, measured, and terrifying in its grace. "I am always where I am needed," he said. "And I think You are needed. The rain fell harder, and the wind tugged at their cloaks and hair. Yet in the space between them, there was silence. Leora felt it then, the magnetic pull of destiny, the sense that her life was about to change forever. She wanted to run, to flee back into the dark forest, yet her legs refused. Her heart, wild and wounded, beat with a strange hope. Kellen circled her slowly, like a predator and a guardian at once. You carry the pain of rejection, he said, his voice softer now. Yet you are not broken. There is fire within you, though it sleeps. The world has turned its back, but I. He paused, letting the words hang between them. I see what others cannot. Leora's throat tightened. She had spent her life hiding, shrinking herself to survive, pretending that the words of her pack did not hurt. And yet, here was someone who saw her not as weak, not as worthless, but as something rare, something powerful in its own quiet way. A sudden gust of wind tore through the clearing, and Leora shivered violently. The storm was not done with them yet. Kellen's eyes flicked toward the trees, alert and unyielding. You are not safe, he said. Even now, eyes watch from the shadows, and old enemies do not forgive easily. What do you mean? She asked, panic rising. They envy strength, he said simply, and they fear what they cannot control. You are both. Before she could question further, a low growl echoed from the tree line, carrying a threat that made Leora's blood run cold. Figures moved in the shadows, shapes hunched and dangerous, their intentions clear. Her mind raced. She had thought the storm was her only danger. She had been wrong. Kellen's hand, strong and warm, rested briefly on her shoulder. The touch was grounding, anchoring her to the moment. Yet it carried authority that made her pulse leap. Do not be afraid, he said. Not while I stand. The figure stepped forward, and Leora realized how small she was in the vastness of the forest. The shadows drew closer, and yet she did not run. Something in Kellen's presence steadied her, filled her with courage she had never known she possessed. The storm raged around them, rain blinding and wind tearing at their clothes. Yet Leora felt a spark of something else, strength, defiance, and the first whisper of hope. She was rejected, yes, but she was not defeated. Not yet. Kellen turned his gaze to her again, and for a fleeting moment, the storm seemed to pause, as if the world itself waited for what would happen next. Leora knew, in that heartbeat, that following the silver wolf's howl was only the beginning dot, and then the shadows lunged. Cliffhanger. Leora's heart froze as the first figure stepped fully into the clearing, claws glinting in the lightning. Kellen shifted slightly in front of her, silver hair whipping in the wind, eyes like molten steel. The storm's roar and the enemy's growl collided, and Leora realized that her journey had only just begun, and survival would demand more than courage alone. The first shadow lunged, and Kellen moved like a storm made flesh. His silver hair whipped around his face as he shifted with a speed and strength that Leora could scarcely follow. The figure fell back with a hiss, eyes wide in shock, leaving Leora blinking in the rain. She realized, with both awe and fear, that Kellen was not merely a man, he was a force of nature, a protector and predator intertwined. You must stay behind me, Kellen commanded, his voice cutting through the wind. It was calm, steady, but every syllable carried authority. Do not run, but do not act recklessly either. Leora's heart raced, but she nodded, gripping the soaked hem of her cloak. Her instincts screamed that she could not rely entirely on him, that her own survival depended on awakening something she had long buried. She took a deep breath, letting the cold rain wash over her, trying to calm the fear that clawed at her chest. The shadows hesitated. They were not ordinary wolves or men, they were twisted, spectral creatures, remnants of some old curse, lingering in the forest as guardians of the darkness that had long haunted this land. Their eyes glowed with malice, and their movements were fluid, unnatural. Leora felt a shiver run down her spine. The storm had become a battleground, and she was at its center. Kellen's gaze never wavered from the creatures. They feed on fear, he said quietly, more to her than to the enemies. Do not give them that power. Leora clenched her fists, remembering the shame and rejection she had carried for so long. She would not let it control her now. She would not give the shadows what they wanted. She lifted her chin, trying to steady her trembling hands. The rain soaked her to the bone, but for the first time, she felt a spark of courage, a tiny flame flickering against the storm. Kellen moved again, faster than her eyes could follow, striking one of the shadows with a force that sent it crashing into the wet earth. Leora saw the way his muscles rippled, the way his eyes shone with an otherworldly intensity. She realized then that he was not just a protector. He was a king of his world, a ruler whose power could reshape the very air around him. Yet despite his strength, Kellen did not attack recklessly. Every movement was calculated, precise. He was a predator, yes, but also a guardian. And now, he had placed his trust in her, asking her to follow, to survive, to act when needed. The shadows circled again, more cautiously this time, as if they were testing the strength of their prey. Leora's pulse pounded in her ears. She had never fought anything in her life. She had survived on wits, on hiding, on avoiding danger. But now she felt something awaken within her, a primal instinct, a connection to the forest, the storm, the very life around her. Kellen's eyes met hers for a brief moment. "Do not fear what is within you," he said, voice low. The forest, the storm, the hunt, they all recognize strength. Let them recognize yours. The words sank in. Leora did not fully understand them, but they struck a chord deep inside her. She could feel the power thrumming in her veins, like a heartbeat she had never known. She would not run. She would not cower. A shadow lunged again, faster this time, and Leora acted without thinking. She grabbed a sturdy branch from the forest floor, swinging it instinctively. The creature recoiled, hissing, and she felt a surge of triumph. It was not much, not compared to Kellen's strength, but it was hers. She had acted, she had fought, she had survived. Kellen's lips curved into a faint, approving smile. "Good," he said. "You are learning." Leora's chest swelled with a mixture of fear and pride. For the first time, someone had acknowledged her strength, not as a joke, not as a weakness, but as a real, tangible power. The storm continued to rage around them, but inside her, a quiet fire burned. The shadows hesitated once more, and Kellen seized the moment. He moved like lightning, striking two of them simultaneously. Leora could barely follow the motion, but she saw the precision, the authority, the raw force that marked him as a leader of both men and beasts. The remaining shadows retreated into the darkness, growling and snarling, unwilling to face the full power of the Alpha King. When the forest finally fell silent, save for the rain and distant thunder, Leora sank to her knees, exhausted and soaked through. She had never faced such danger before, and yet she was alive. She looked at Kellen, who stood tall, his silver hair plastered to his face, his eyes still scanning the forest. He was beautiful and terrifying all at once, a being of storms and shadows. "You survived," he said finally, voice softening. "Most would have fallen or run. You did neither." Leora shivered, partly from cold, partly from the intensity of the moment. I followed you," she admitted, voice small. "I couldn't help it." Kellen's gaze softened slightly, though the storm in his eyes did not vanish entirely. "The silver wolf does not call for those unworthy," he said. "There's a reason you are here, Leora. A reason the forest has guided you to me." She looked at him, confusion and awe mingling in her chest. "Why me? I am nothing, just an omega, rejected by my pack." Kellen stepped closer, the rain sliding off his shoulders like liquid silver. "You are more than you know," he said. "Rejected by the weak, ignored by the blind, but not by fate, not by the forest, not by me." The words struck her deeply, and for the first time in years, Leora felt seen, truly seen. The storm continued to rage around them, yet in that clearing, there was a strange stillness, a fragile moment of calm amid chaos, and then she noticed a movement in the trees. Not the shadows from before, but something else, something larger, something watching. Kellen's expression hardened. "You are not safe here," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "The storm is only the beginning. There are forces in this forest older and darker than you can imagine, and they know of you." Fear clawed at Leora's chest again. but it was mingled with something new: determination. She had been rejected, cast out, told she was weak, yet here she was, standing beside a being who radiated power and purpose. She would not let the forest, or the shadows, or the storm, or fate itself dictate her end. Kellen extended a hand. "Come with me," he said. "You must learn to control the strength that has awakened in you. There is no time for hesitation. The forest has eyes, and the night has teeth. Only together can we survive what is coming." Leora hesitated, looking at his hand, at the rain pouring down like silver threads. She felt a flicker of fear. He was a stranger, a creature of legend, a force she could scarcely comprehend, but also a flicker of trust. Something deep in her instinct urged her forward, told her that this man, this Alpha King, was the key to her survival, and perhaps to her destiny. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. It was warm, strong, and steady, a lifeline in a night full of uncertainty. Kellen's grip tightened just enough to reassure her, and together, they stepped deeper into the forest, leaving the clearing behind. The storm continued to rage, but Leora felt something shift inside her. No longer just a rejected Omega, no longer just a frightened girl fleeing the world. She was something more, an Omega beginning to awaken, learning the first lessons of courage, strength, and trust. And yet, even as they moved forward, the forest whispered warnings in the wind. Shadows shifted in the corners of her vision, eyes glinting in the darkness, waiting. Forces older and darker than the storm itself were stirring, drawn to her presence. The night was far from over, and the journey she had begun by following the silver wolf's howl was only the first step into a world of danger, power, and a destiny she had never imagined. Cliffhanger. A sudden flash of lightning illuminated the forest ahead, revealing dozens of glowing eyes staring directly at them. Leora froze, heart pounding, as she realized that Kellen's protection might not be enough. The enemy was larger, stronger, and closer than she had feared, and the storm had only just begun. The forest shadows seemed alive as Kellen led Leora through winding paths that twisted like the veins of the earth. Rain had softened the ground, turning roots and rocks into dangerous traps. But he moved with the confidence of one who had walked these woods for centuries. Leora followed, her heart pounding in her chest, partly from the exertion, partly from the presence of the Alpha King beside her. "Stay close," Kellen warned. "The storm brought more than rain tonight." Leora nodded, trying to ignore the chill that seeped into her bones. She had followed his silver howl into the forest, had faced shadows and enemies she could barely understand, and survived. But the night was not yet over, and the sense of danger pressing in around them reminded her that survival required more than courage. The clearing opened onto a narrow valley, shrouded in mist and framed by jagged cliffs. There, in the distance, Leora could see the faint glow of torches. A fortress, carved into the mountainside, stood like a sentinel against the storm. Its walls were ancient, adorned with intricate runes that pulsed faintly, hinting at power older than memory. "This is my home," Kellen said softly. Yet there was no softness in the way he spoke of it. "It is both sanctuary and prison. Here, you will learn to survive and to control the power stirring within you." Leora swallowed hard, stepping closer. She had never imagined a place like this, fortified, mysterious, and alive with the hum of old magic. She felt small beneath its towering walls, yet something in her chest stirred a spark of hope, of possibility. Kellen led her through massive iron gates, their weight making the ground tremble beneath her feet. Guards, clad in silver and black, nodded respectfully as he passed. Leora realized for the first time that this was not just a man in the forest. He was a king, a ruler, a being of authority that demanded obedience and respect. She felt both awe and intimidation, a mixture that made her pulse quicken. Inside, the fortress was a labyrinth of stone corridors, lit by flickering torches and enchanted lanterns that glowed with soft, silver light. Shadows clung to the walls, moving in ways that seemed almost alive. Kellen's eyes scanned every corner, alert and unyielding. Leora felt as if she had stepped into another world, one where danger and wonder walked hand in hand. "You must understand," Kellen said, his voice low, that life here is not the same as in the forest. The rules are different. Power is respected, not earned by birth alone. You will be tested, and your strength will be challenged in ways you cannot yet imagine. Leora nodded, feeling both nervous and determined. She had survived rejection, the storm, and the shadows. Surely, she could face whatever awaited her here. And yet, she could not shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of a journey that would demand everything she had: heart, mind, and spirit. Kellen guided her to a chamber high in the fortress, its windows overlooking the valley below. Rain streaked the glass, and lightning lit the night sky in sudden flashes. The room was simple, with a bed, a wooden table, and shelves lined with old tomes. But it radiated a quiet power, as if even the walls themselves had witnessed centuries of triumph and tragedy. You will rest here, Kellen said. Tomorrow, your lessons begin. Tonight, you recover. The forest will not forget your presence, and neither will your enemies. Leora sank onto the bed, exhausted from the storm, from fear, from adrenaline. She thought of the shadows, the growls, the way Kellen had moved like lightning to protect her. And yet, she could not stop thinking of him, his silver hair, his piercing eyes, the calm authority in his voice. He was terrifying, yes, but there was something about him that made her heart ache with a strange longing, a desire she could not name. As she lay there, listening to the rain drumming against the windows, she realized that she had been living in the shadows of others her whole life, rejected, dismissed, overlooked. And now, here she was, in the presence of someone who recognized her strength, who had seen something in her that no one else had. The thought both frightened and exhilarated her. The next morning, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, and Kellen appeared at the door, his silver hair still damp from the storm. His eyes met hers, sharp and commanding, yet with a hint of curiosity. Your first test begins today, he said. It is not just about strength or skill. It is about trust, courage, and understanding the power you carry. He led her to a courtyard, where the training ground stretched like a small battlefield. Dummies, targets, and obstacles were arranged in patterns that seemed random at first. But Leora sensed a hidden purpose in every placement. Kellen's gaze swept over her, and she felt the weight of his scrutiny. You will face trials, he explained. Each one is designed to test a different part of you. Your mind, your body, your spirit. Fail, and you will learn the consequences of weakness. Succeed, and you will awaken the strength you have always carried. The first trial was physical: running across uneven terrain, leaping over obstacles, striking targets with precision. Leora stumbled at first, her muscles protesting, her lungs burning. But Kellen's presence was steady, guiding, not intervening unless necessary. Each correction, each word, was deliberate, teaching her without diminishing her. By the time the trial ended, Leora was drenched in sweat and rain, but there was a spark in her eyes she had never seen before. She had not only survived, she had grown. Kellen's approving nod made her chest swell with pride, and for a brief moment, she felt as if she belonged here, with him, in this world of storms and power. The second trial tested her mind. Kellen presented riddles and puzzles, challenges designed to provoke thought and strategy. Leora struggled at first, doubting herself, remembering the words of her pack that had once told her she was slow, unworthy, incapable. But Kellen's quiet encouragement pushed her forward. Slowly, she began to see patterns, to trust her instincts, to find solutions she had never known were within her. You are learning to see beyond what is obvious, Kellen said, his voice soft but firm. This is a gift and a weapon. Never underestimate it. Leora felt a thrill run through her. She had always believed herself powerless, overlooked, discarded. Yet here, under Kellen's guidance, she was discovering that she was neither weak nor insignificant. She was awakening. The final trial of the day was the most difficult test of trust and courage. Kellen blindfolded her, leading her through the training grounds, instructing her to move with awareness, to listen, to feel the space around her. Leora's heart pounded as she stumbled, caught herself, and finally moved with a tentative grace, guided by instinct and Kellen's calm voice. When the blindfold was removed, she found herself facing him, Their eyes locked. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet stronger than she had ever felt before. Kellen's gaze softened, and for a fleeting moment, the storm of authority and danger that surrounded him seemed to ease. "You are ready," he said quietly. "Not fully, not yet, but you have taken the first steps. The path ahead will test you further, in ways neither of us can yet predict. But you will not face it alone." Leora's chest tightened. She had always walked alone, had always carried fear and rejection like a weight on her shoulders. And yet, here was someone powerful, untamed, yet patient, who saw her, who guided her, who believed in her. As they stood there, rain still falling gently around them, Leora sensed the undercurrent of something deeper than lessons or trials. There was a connection between them, a silent understanding that neither needed to name yet, but that bound them in a way that was impossible to ignore. And then a sudden, sharp cry echoed from the fortress gates. Leora spun, heart leaping, and saw movement, figures approaching, cloaked in shadows, moving with intent and precision. Kellen's expression hardened instantly, the calm authority giving way to the predator he truly was. "They have come," he said, voice low, almost a growl, "and they know you are here. Your trials are not yet over, Leora. The real test begins now." Her pulse raced, but a strange sense of readiness filled her. She had faced the storm, the shadows, the forest. She had learned the first lessons of strength, trust, and courage. Now, whatever was coming, she would face it not as a rejected Omega, but as someone beginning to awaken, someone capable of standing beside the Alpha King who had chosen her. The shadows advanced, and Kellen stepped forward, silver hair catching the fading light, eyes burning with unyielding power. Leora felt a strange calm settle over her. Fear still lingered, yes, but it was tempered by determination. She would not run. She would not hide. She would face this trial, and whatever came after, together. Cliffhanger. The first shadow stepped fully into the courtyard, its eyes glowing like molten silver. Leora's heart pounded, rain mingling with the tension in the air, as she realized that this was no ordinary test. The fortress walls could not protect them forever, and the enemy's intent was clear. They had come for her. Kellen's hand brushed against hers, not a touch of comfort, but a reminder that she was not alone. The fight for survival, and the awakening of her true strength, had only just begun. The courtyard had become a battlefield. Shadows moved with unnatural speed, circling Kellen and Leora like predators sensing fear and hesitation. Rain-slicked stones reflected their movements, turning the ground into a treacherous mirror. Leora's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her gaze steady, matching Kellen's calm intensity as best she could. Kellen's silver hair whipped in the wind, his eyes sharp, alert, scanning for every hint of danger. His presence was commanding, like a mountain unmoving against the storm. Yet there was something in his posture of tension, a readiness that told Leora the fight ahead would not be easy. She clenched her fists, feeling the first true stirrings of courage that had been awakened in her through their training. "Stay close," Kellen instructed. "Watch, listen, move when I tell you. And trust yourself." Leora nodded. Trust herself. The words echoed in her mind. She had doubted herself her entire life, but now she felt a spark of confidence she had never known. Her mind was sharp, her instincts alive. She could feel the rhythm of the storm, the patterns in the shadows, the weight of the world around her. She was no longer a mere Omega, she was awakening. The first shadow lunged. Kellen struck with precise, fluid motion, felling it in an instant. Leora followed his instructions, sidestepping and using the terrain to her advantage, striking with a fallen branch to distract another shadow. She was clumsy at first, but each movement built on the last. Each breath, each heartbeat, strengthened her resolve. "You're learning quickly," Kellen said, his voice steady over the wind. "But do not rely on me. Your strength must come from within." The shadows hesitated, circling them now, their eyes glowing with anticipation. Leora realized that this was more than a simple attack. It was a tested trial to see if she could face danger without fear, if she could rise to the power within her. One shadow moved differently, slower, almost calculating. Leora noticed it first, sensing the shift in energy. Kellen's gaze followed hers, and he nodded slightly. Yes, you see it. Good, use it. Leora's pulse quickened. She moved with precision, guiding the shadow into a trap Kellen had prepared, causing it to stumble and fall. The creatures hissed and retreated briefly, giving Leora a moment to catch her breath. Kellen's eyes softened just slightly. You have grown stronger today, he said quietly, almost to himself. Stronger than I expected. Stronger than even you realize. Leora's chest tightened. She had never been praised for strength, only scorned for weakness. Hearing these words from Kellen, a being of such power, filled her with an unfamiliar warmth. And yet, the shadows were not gone. The storm, it seemed, would not yield easily. You must continue, Kellen said, moving toward the remaining shadows. Leora followed, her senses sharp, ready for the next challenge. Each step was careful, deliberate, guided by instinct and the lesson she had learned. The rain soaked through her hair and clothes, but she hardly noticed. She was alive. She was awake. The shadows advanced again, more aggressively this time. Kellen moved with fluidity, a predator in his element. Leora mirrored him, finding strength in her own movements. She blocked a strike from a shadow, retaliated with a swift motion, and felt a surge of triumph. For the first time, she understood what Kellen meant when he said strength came from within. The battle raged, the storm crashing around them, and Leora realized something profound. She was not only fighting the shadows, she was fighting the fear that had haunted her for years. Every strike, every movement, every moment of courage chipped away at the chains of doubt and rejection that had bound her. Kellen glanced at her, and in that fleeting moment, their eyes met. No words were spoken, yet a silent understanding passed between them, a bond forged in danger, trust, and awakening power. Leora felt her heart thrum in a way she had never known, a mixture of fear, exhilaration, and something else, something unspoken, a connection deeper than mere survival. The shadows faltered, sensing the growing strength between them. Kellen's eyes glowed like molten silver as he moved with deadly grace, striking down the remaining creatures one by one. Leora followed, using her instincts and newfound courage to aid him. Together, they became a force neither the shadows nor the storm could break. Finally, the last shadow fell, dissolving into mist that the wind carried away. Silence returned, save for the rain and the occasional rumble of thunder. Leora sank to her knees, exhausted, soaked, yet triumphant. She had faced the storm, the shadows, and herself, and she had survived. Kellen approached, his expression unreadable, but softening just enough to reveal the faintest hint of pride. You have done well, he said, but this is only the beginning. The forest, the curse, the enemies, you have only scratched the surface of what awaits. Leora nodded, her chest heaving. She felt both relief and anticipation, a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced danger and survived, but she knew that her journey was far from over. She had tasted strength, tasted courage, and she wanted more. As they walked toward the fortress, Kellen's hand brushed hers, not a touch of comfort, but a reminder, a tether in a world that was still dangerous and unpredictable. Leora felt a strange warmth, a connection she could not name. She realized that the bond between them was growing, not through words, but through trust, shared danger, and the awakening of her power. Inside the fortress, Kellen led her to a room lined with ancient tomes and scrolls. You must understand the forest, its magic, and the curse that binds it, he said. Knowledge is power, and your mind must be as strong as your body. The curse that haunts this land is old, and only those who understand it can hope to challenge it. Leora's eyes widened as she took in the shelves, the runes carved into the wood, the faint glow of enchanted texts. She had never seen anything like this, history and magic intertwined, knowledge preserved through centuries, waiting to be discovered. Kellen placed a hand on a tome, its cover etched with symbols that seemed to shift under the flickering light. The curse was born of betrayal, he explained, of pride, of envy, of anger left unchecked. It lingers because the past refuses to let go. We must confront it, understand it, and find a way to heal what was broken. Only then can the forest and you be truly free. Leora felt a chill run down her spine. She had always thought the forest, the shadows, and the storm were her enemies. But now she realized that the true challenge was understanding, accepting, and confronting the deeper forces at play. The curse was more than magic. It was history, pain, and consequence entwined. "You will help me," Kellen said, his gaze intense. "You have a role in this, Leora. The strength I see in you is not just for survival. It is for something greater, something the forest itself has chosen." Leora swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She had come here seeking safety, guidance, and perhaps a place to belong. But now she understood that she had been chosen for a purpose, greater than herself, a purpose that demanded courage, wisdom, and heart. I will do my best," she said quietly, though her voice carried determination. Kellen's gaze softened. "Your best is enough, but do not forget this path will challenge you in ways you cannot yet imagine. You will face fear, doubt, and loss. You will be tested, not just by the forest, but by yourself." Leora nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. She had already faced fear and doubt, and she had survived. She would face more, and she would grow stronger for it. As the evening descended, the storm finally began to ease, leaving a silver mist drifting through the fortress and the forest beyond. Leora looked out over the walls, the rain-streaked valley stretching below, and felt a strange sense of purpose. She had been rejected, cast out, and dismissed, yet here she was, chosen by the forest, the storm, and the silver wolf who had become her guide, and she knew, deep in her heart, that the trials ahead would demand everything she had: strength, courage, wisdom, and perhaps even trust in the one being who had become her anchor in the storm. Kellen stood beside her, silent, his eyes scanning the horizon. For a moment, they did not speak. The world seemed to hold its breath, the forest waiting, the shadows lurking, the curse stirring. Then he spoke, his voice a low rumble, almost lost in the whisper of the wind. "You are ready for the next step, Leora. The forest will test you further. The curse will challenge you, and you will discover the truth about your strength and your heart." Leora met his gaze, feeling both fear and anticipation. She had survived storms, shadows, and rejection. She had faced her first trials and discovered the spark of power within her. Now, she would face the deeper challenges, the ones that would define her, and perhaps define the bond between her and the Alpha King. Cliffhanger. A sudden tremor shook the fortress walls. Faint at first, then growing stronger. Leora stumbled, and Kellen's eyes darkened. Outside, the forest roared, and shadows emerged from the mist like a tide of darkness. Something ancient had awakened, drawn to the presence of the Omega and the Alpha. Leora realized, with a shiver of both fear and excitement, that the true challenge, the one that would test her strength, her courage, and her heart, was only just beginning. The forest was tense with anticipation. Mist rolled low across the ground, curling around tree trunks like silent sentinels. Kel's eyes scanned every shadow, every flicker of movement. The rider from the edge of the forest had not spoken again, but the intent in their gaze was unmistakable. Danger was near, and the Omega and the child she carried were the prize. Lyra stayed close, her small frame pressed against Kel's side, hands resting over her belly. She had grown stronger in these days of flight and fear, her silence no longer a weakness but a shield. Every glance, every movement carried meaning. Every heartbeat was a promise to endure and protect. Kel's hand brushed the hilt of his sword. "They are coming," he whispered. "We cannot wait. We must move toward the river. The water will conceal our path, and from there, we can reach the mountains. They will not follow us there." Lyra's eyes met his, wide and steady. Though she could not speak, the understanding passed between them in a single, unbroken thread. She nodded once, small but firm, ready to follow. Together, they moved through the undergrowth, careful, silent, shadows themselves among shadows. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Birds ceased their song, leaves ceased their rustle, and even the wind felt still. Kel's instincts were heightened. He had faced countless battles, but never one like this. Protecting a silent Omega and the air she carried required more than skill. With a blade, it required patience. strategy, and an unspoken understanding of courage. Hours passed as they navigated the twisted paths of the forest. The sun rose higher, and the mist began to lift, revealing the rugged terrain ahead. Cale led them to the river, the water glinting silver under the weak sunlight. He knelt, examining the current. "We cross here," he said. "The water is swift, but it will carry us faster than any pursuer can follow. Once we reach the cliffs on the far side, the path to the mountains will be hidden." Lyra pressed her hands against her belly, sensing the life within responding to the sound of rushing water. She understood instinctively that the river was their lifeline, a fragile hope against the relentless pursuit. Cale extended a hand, helping her to steady herself on the slippery rock stot as they began to cross. The distant sound of hooves thundered through the forest. The rider had returned, accompanied by others. Their intent clear, they would not let the Omega escape. Cale's eyes narrowed. He positioned himself between Lyra and the approaching danger, sword at the ready. Every sense focused, Lyra followed his lead, moving carefully, her feet slipping occasionally on the slick stones. But Cale's hand guided her, steady and unwavering. The child within her stirred, and she whispered silently to the life she carried, promising safety, promising survival. The first wave of attackers reached the riverbank. Cale stepped forward, sword gleaming, muscles coiled. The clash was swift and precise, a dance of skill and strategy. Lyra stayed close, silent, observing, ready to move if necessary. Though she had no weapon, her presence was a force in itself, a quiet courage that bolstered Cale's resolve. One of the pursuers lunged toward Lyra, but Cale intercepted, parrying with perfect timing. The intruder stumbled, giving Cale the advantage to disarm him without fatal harm. The others hesitated, realizing that their target was protected by someone more than capable, and a silent Omega who seemed to radiate strength beyond her appearance. Lyra's eyes met Cale's during the fight. Though no words were exchanged, they communicated trust, courage, and unspoken understanding. She pressed her hands to her belly again, feeling the child's heartbeat sync with her own, a fragile rhythm of life and hope. Cale fought with a precision and determination that came not only from skill, but from the bond forming between him and the Omega. Every strike, every parry, was guided by the promise to protect the heir. The battle reached its climax as the last of the pursuers faltered, retreating into the forest with curses and threats. Cale lowered his sword slowly, breathing heavily, but his eyes never left Lyra. She remained calm, unshaken, small and silent, yet immeasurably strong in presence. "Safe for now," Cale said softly, kneeling beside her. "But we must keep moving. The mountains are still ahead, and there are others who will try to take her." Lyra pressed her hand briefly against his, a gesture that conveyed more than words ever could: trust, gratitude, and an unspoken promise that she would endure. Cale's chest tightened with an unfamiliar emotion, one he had never allowed himself in the midst of battles and kings. Respect had grown into something deeper, something protective, almost reverent. They continued along the river, careful to remain hidden among the rocks and trees. The forest gradually gave way to rugged cliffs, and the river narrowed into a swift, rocky stream. Cale guided Lyra to a narrow path along the cliffside, careful to keep her safe from both the terrain and any lingering threats. As night fell, they found a hidden alcove among the cliffs. The space was small but sheltered, a perfect refuge to rest. Lyra sank onto the ground, exhausted but alert, hands resting protectively on her belly. Cale remained close, eyes scanning the darkness, sword ready, yet mindful of the fragile peace of the moment. "The mountains are within reach," Cale said quietly. "Once we cross the pass, they cannot follow easily. The child will be safe, and you will finally have a chance to breathe." Lyra's gaze met his, unwavering. Though she could not speak, her silence was filled with trust and determination. She had survived chains, storms, pursuit, and scorn. Now, with Cale beside her, she felt the fragile hope of safety for herself and the child she carried. Hours passed in the quiet of the alcove. The moon rose, casting silver light over the cliffs and river below. Cale kept watch, vigilant, yet aware of the growing bond between himself and the silent Omega. He had protected many lives, but none had affected him so deeply. Her courage, her silence, her determination to endure and protect life against all odds. It had awakened something within him he could not deny. The first light of dawn revealed the mountains ahead, jagged and imposing, yet offering sanctuary. Cale extended a hand to Lyra, helping her to stand. Together, they began the final stretch, each step careful, deliberate, and full of hope. At the mountain pass, they paused, hidden from view by the rocky terrain. The wind was sharp, cold, but it carried a sense of freedom, of a world beyond fear and pursuit. Lyra pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the child within respond to the fresh air. The new hope. Cale watched her closely, protective, aware that this moment marked the turning point in their journey. "This is it," he said softly. "Once we cross, they cannot follow easily. You and the child. You will be safe." Lyra's eyes met his, wide, trusting, and full of quiet strength. Though she could not speak, her gaze said it all: gratitude, hope, and a promise to endure. Cale felt his chest tighten with an emotion he could no longer contain, something beyond duty, beyond loyalty, something deeply personal, protective, and reverent. As they began the descent into the hidden valley beyond the pass, the forest behind them slowly disappeared from view. The threat of pursuit had diminished, though Cale remained vigilant. Lyra walked steadily, silent but determined, each step a testament to her courage and the bond she had formed with her protector. At last, they reached a secluded grove, hidden from the world, where the river widened and the trees grew thick. Lyra knelt beside the water, pressing her hands to her belly, feeling the child stir with life and strength. Cale stood close, scanning the perimeter, yet a sense of peace settled over him, a rare and fragile peace he had not known in years. "This is safe," Cale said quietly. "You can rest here, and the child will be protected. I will not leave your side." Lyra looked at him, eyes shining with trust and quiet gratitude. Though no words passed between them, the bond forged in silence and danger was complete. She had endured chains, storms, and relentless pursuit, and now, with Cale beside her, she felt the first true sense of safety. The moon rose high above the grove, casting silver light over the hidden sanctuary. Lyra pressed her hands to her belly once more, feeling the steady heartbeat within. Cale knelt beside her, hand hovering close, a silent promise of protection. Together, they had survived the storm, the forest, and the pursuit. Together, they had ensured the future of the air, the future of the kingdom. And in the quiet of the grove, beneath the silver light and the whispering trees, the silent Omega and the vigilant protector found a fragile, enduring peace, a promise that life, courage, and trust could prevail even in the darkest of times. Final cliffhanger, resolution. Far above the grove, a crow perched silently on a twisted branch, eyes glinting. Its call echoed once, sharp and clear. Though danger remained in the world, for now, the air was safe, the Omega was free, and a silent bond had been forged that even time could not break.